Okay, so meeting's now live streaming. Great. All right, so we're on Pseukei D'Zimrah. Last week we did Birkot HaShachar, which was when you first wake up. These are Pseukei D'Zimrah. These are verses of praise. These are actually always said in the synagogue. Again, there's not a lot of Jewish law around it. There is some Jewish law. We'll mention it. There's not a lot. But we'll go through what exactly is Pseukei D'Zimrah. So there is this tradition, like some traditional people will say the book of Psalms daily. If you've never done it before, you might want to take a month. There's 150 Psalms, just break it up and read the whole book. It does actually read as a unit, as the book, and it's kind of a cool thing to do once. So daily we do Psalms 100 and then 145 to 150. Those are the last 5 Psalms. So that's part of the daily service. At Shabbat, there's 16 Psalms in the Pseukei D'Zimrah. We don't do them all in our community, but if you go to other communities, they do. The idea is that they don't care how long Shabbat services last, morning services. So if you have a morning service that begins at 8 a.m. and ends at 2 p.m., you'll do all of them. I wouldn't suggest that for this community or any community that I would want to go to. Okay, and so if we start in Lev Shalem, we start the Pseukei D'Zimrah on page 122. This is with Baruch She'amar. The idea is, blessed be the one who says, and the world is created. Can anyone tell me what that refers to? Someone who can create the world with a saying?
Let there be light.
Exactly. That's the idea of like the idea that God created the world just with a word, and that our words are powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's Baruch She'amar V'haya Ha'olam Baruch Hu. So that is Baruch She'amar. It was written in the 9th century. I think it was Amram. It was in the Siddur Amram. So it's a very old prayer. It's been around for, do my math, 1,100 years. Okay. So now that is followed by, on page 124, 123, I'm sorry, David's prayer, the dedication of the ark. This is a verse from Chronicles, and it talks about David. We had the Mishkan that held the 10 Commandments, and when the Mishkan, the Ark of the Covenant, I don't know if you're an Indiana Jones, right? So when that went from its place and came into Jerusalem, that was a time of great rejoicing, and David really made a big deal of King David really made a big deal of it. And so this what's next on page 123 and 124 is his prayer that he sang. So the first half is identical to Psalm 105, and the second half is identical to Psalm 96. And since Pseukei D'Zimrah is part of the Psalms, we think maybe that's why it's in here. It's also kind of a fun thing to remember. And we move on to page 125 to Romamu. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lahar raglav. We say that a couple of times in the service. And these are a series of verses from the Psalms that's meant to be a substitute for reading all of the book of Psalms. So you just say the kind of highlights, I guess. These would be the cliff notes of the Psalms. So it's like called I think Lev Shalem calls it the anthology of verses from Psalms, redemption of the people of Israel. Then, so we move on. And then we have just Psalms, and more Psalms. The next one I want to point out is Psalm 100. Is not in Lev Shalem, but it's in the daily service. This is a psalm of Thanksgiving when they made the Thanksgiving sacrifice during Mincha, which somehow the psalm made it from Mincha into this service. It's not, there was no Thanksgiving sacrifice on Shabbat, so it's not in our Shabbat Siddur, Shabbat prayer books. Then again, if you're just looking at, if you're thumbing through Lev Shalem, you will see on pages, let's see, where do we go? After 126, you'll see just all these different psalms, one for different different occasions. And the idea is that on Shabbat, there's no concern about the length of the service. So you can have 16 psalms here, up to 16 psalms. Ashkenazi have it. The Sephardic put in a nice mystical poem called Haderet HaEmunah. And that those continue, and you can add in, when you're a prayer leader, you can decide what to do, which one you want to do. On page 136 is coming up to 136, which is mandatory. You have Psalm 145. It's called the Ashrei. This is something that there's Jewish law. You're supposed to say it 3 times a day. Ashrei Yoshve, or Ashrei Yoshve Vetecha Od Yehalucha Selah. That is that psalm. That is mandatory. Then we have what's called a mini Hallel, Psalms 146 to 150. It's also called the daily Hallel. Rambam codified this in Mishkan and Mishneh Torah, the Tefillah. That we say Psalms 145 to 150. So we're always saying that last bit of Psalms. And if you ever have time, read through it. They definitely are a unit. And it ends with the big, Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. That's 150. That ends it. And then we continue. So that's the end of that, the Psalms part of it. But then we go on to other biblical passages, which are, they're interesting. They're very interesting. As you are sitting in synagogue, I really, again, encourage you to just pick one and look at it. The first one is David's on page 142. Are you guys, if you have, go to 142. David's final prayer is, again, his prayer at the inauguration at the Beit HaMikdash. I don't think it's the Beit HaMikdash. It's where the Mishkan was settling. I have to look at that up again. But the next is Nehemiah. It's like just a small, brief history of the Jews. And it introduces this Exodus 14 and 15, which was the Song of the Seas. That's on page 143. Originally, it was part of the Mincha offering. That's the second time we see the Mincha offering. As it was sung by the Levites as part of the Mincha offering. So that's Az Yashir Moshe Uvane Yisrael.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a nice song. Then we have 3 lines proclaiming God's sovereignty, Psalm 22, Obadiah, and Zechariah. And it ends with Nishmat Kol Chai, is the end of, kind of thought of as the end of Pseukei D'Zimrah. And it is, that prayer is originally found in Ta'anit, in the Talmud, Ta'anit 6b and Brachot 59b, and it is a prayer of thanksgiving for rainfall following a drought, which is not something that we really mentioned during the service, but it's kind of a cool thing to think about every once in a while. And then finally, we finish. We have Shochen Ad, and we finished with Chatzi Kaddish. Chatzi Kaddish is like a soft ending. Remember, Kaddish, there's the mourner's Kaddish, which everybody knows, but then there's different Kaddishes like Kaddish Shalem, a full Kaddish, or a Chatzi Kaddish, which mark the It marks the end of a prayer service. It marks the end of a specific type of, one part of the service and transitioning to another. So when you hear a Kaddish, like that
Mhm.
it's not, it's more of like a place marker. So if you're not really listening, you'll know like, oh, we just ended Pseukei D'Zimrah.
Oh,
Which is, yeah. So I'm going to stop streaming and then we'll take questions.